I never expected a single morning to feel like it could unravel my entire sense of self. The sunlight seeped through the curtains, spilling gold across the bedroom, but the warmth didn't reach me. My hands trembled as I stared at the clothes laid out neatly on the chair: a delicate lace blouse, a flowing pastel skirt, sheer stockings, and a pair of heels that seemed far too sharp, too tall, too foreign. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of anticipation, fear, and the strange thrill of something I didn't yet understand. "You need to try everything on," my wife said softly, her voice calm but firm, carrying the weight of authority and care all at once. Her eyes didn't waver. They held me in place, unblinking, as if daring me to turn away. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. This was not the playful teasing of yesterday, or the experimental dressing in secret at home. This was deliberate, public, visible, real. My reflection in the mirror caught my gaze, and I almost didn't recognize myself. The face looking back was familiar, yes, but softer, more exposed, trembling under the pressure of expectation. Step by trembling step, I approached the chair. I picked up the blouse first, feeling its texture between my fingers. It was softer than I imagined, delicate and intimate in a way that made my chest constrict. My fingers fumbled over the buttons as my mind spun. Who am I supposed to be in this?
Me?
Someone else? Or just whatever she wants me to be? When I slipped the blouse on, the fabric hugging my shoulders and chest, I felt a strange sense of vulnerability. My wife watched quietly, hands folded, her gaze appraising but not unkind. "Stand up straight," she instructed. I did, feeling the subtle pressure along my spine. A reminder to occupy space, to present myself, to be seen. Next came the skirt. It flowed over my legs like water, brushing my knees, forcing me to adjust my posture with each step. I caught myself in the mirror again. The reflection was startlingly different. My hips appeared narrower, my legs longer, my shoulders smaller, and the person staring back at me felt fragile, yet unfamiliarly alive. When I slid into the stockings, a shiver ran through me. Each touch against my skin reminded me how exposed I was, how much my body had changed under her guidance. Then came the heels, sharp, towering, impossibly delicate. I lifted each foot with care, wobbling slightly, a soft gasp escaping me as I found my balance. "You're doing fine," she said, her words quiet, but her eyes told a different story. She saw everything: my fear, my hesitation, my tentative pride. She wasn't just teaching me to dress. She was teaching me to exist differently, to occupy a form I had never dared to explore. The mirror reflected me fully now. The blouse, the skirt, the stockings, the heels, and me, trembling and wide-eyed, caught between the man I had always been and the woman I was beginning to recognize. My chest tightened, not just from the blouse, but from the swirl of emotions: fear, confusion, anticipation, and an odd spark of something I didn't yet understand. I moved cautiously, testing each step in the heels. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, every movement deliberate. "Good," she murmured. "Walk around. Feel it. Be it, even if just for a moment."
And I did.
Step by careful step, I moved, wobbling slightly, then finding rhythm. The sensation of balance, posture, and self-awareness collided in my mind. I felt seen. I felt fragile. I felt alive. By the time I stopped in front of the mirror again, sweat clinging faintly to my brow, my reflection had shifted subtly. The fear was still there, but it had a companion now. Curiosity, tentative acceptance, the smallest flicker of pride. I realized then that this was only the beginning. What I had worn, what I had become, wasn't just clothes or a costume. It was a doorway,
A path.
a challenge to everything I thought I knew about myself. And I didn't know if I was ready, but somehow I wanted to try. The next step was stepping outside my comfort zone, literally and metaphorically. My wife held the door open, her gaze steady, unflinching, and something in that quiet confidence forced me to breathe deeper, straighten my spine, and try to meet her eyes without retreating. The world beyond our front door had never looked so sharp, so alive, or so intimidating. We walked slowly down the sidewalk, my heels clicking tentatively against the pavement. Every sound felt amplified, every passerby a potential judge. I could feel their eyes, or maybe I imagined them, it hardly mattered. My reflection shimmered in the glass windows we passed, a trembling figure in pastel skirts and stockings, hands gripping my bag nervously, shoulders tight with anticipation. And yet, even in that tremor, there was a sliver of something new, presence. "Remember," my wife murmured, "you are more than what they see. But let them see it. Let yourself be noticed." Her words collided with the whirlwind of my thoughts. I wanted to shrink. I wanted to vanish. But the corset and the heels, both my prison and my armor, reminded me to stand tall. Step by careful step, I followed her, drawing in a shaky breath, letting my body speak before my mind could falter. A group of teenagers passed us on the sidewalk, laughing loudly. My first instinct was panic, to pivot away, to hide behind my bag. But then one of them gave a faint nod, a gesture of recognition, and my heartbeat stuttered. I blinked at them, unsure if I should smile or lower my gaze. A smile escaped me before I could stop it. Tentative, small, but genuine. And for a heartbeat, their laughter didn't sting. It was just ordinary noise in the background. By the time we reached the cafe, my steps had steadied slightly. My reflection in the window caught me again, and I realized that this girl, cautious, nervous, exposed, was beginning to feel real. Every hesitant movement, every wobble in the heels, every flutter of fear was part of her, part of me. And that realization brought an unexpected warmth. Inside, the cafe smelled like roasted coffee and pastries. The chatter and clatter of cups and conversation wrapped around us, and suddenly I felt painfully visible. I glanced down at my hands, clasped nervously in my lap. My wife squeezed my shoulder. "Sit," she said softly. "Observe. Feel it. You belong here, too." I took a seat at a table near the window. Every glance from strangers felt magnified, every murmur of conversation echoing in my chest. My legs shook slightly, not just from the heels, but from the awareness that I was sitting fully seen. And yet, something inside me stirred. I wasn't shrinking. I was noticing. Every reflection, every whisper, every passing eye was a mirror of possibility. The first real test came when a woman at the next table smiled at me. My chest tightened. My mind screamed to look down, to hide, to pretend I didn't exist. And yet, the girl in the mirror, the one forced upright by the corset, steady by practice, visible by choice, met that smile. I returned it, tentative but sincere. She smiled back. No judgment. No whispering behind my back. Just acknowledgement. It was a small victory, but monumental. A fragile thrill coursed through me. I had engaged, I had existed, and I had not run. I was learning, painfully, awkwardly, tremulously, to own my presence. When we left the cafe, my steps felt slightly lighter, my posture steadier, though every nerve in my body buzzed with adrenaline and fear. The heels had become less of a prison and more of a guide. The corset pressed firmly but supportively against my torso, a constant reminder that strength could be cultivated through discipline, even if it felt uncomfortable. Back home, I collapsed onto the couch, still trembling slightly. My wife didn't speak at first, simply sitting beside me, letting me breathe, letting me exist without commentary. Then she said softly, "Today, you noticed yourself. That's the hardest part of all." I nodded, barely trusting my voice. It's strange. I'm scared, but I think I liked it. Just a little. "That's enough," she said quietly, smiling. "One small step. But notice it, that spark. That is real." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, notebook open on my lap. I wrote slowly, carefully. I went outside. I existed. I was seen. I was nervous, but I was real. This is the first time I feel like me, even if just a fraction. Closing the notebook, I realized something profound. This wasn't about clothes or corsets or heels. It wasn't about becoming someone else. It was about learning to be visible, learning to occupy space without shame, learning to meet the world and myself without fleeing. And for the first time, the idea of tomorrow didn't feel terrifying. It felt possible. The morning light felt softer today, less harsh, but my chest still tightened as I approached the wardrobe. The blouse and skirt waited, neatly folded, the heels gleaming under the soft light. Today, it wasn't just about practicing presence outside. It was about facing myself, fully, without distraction, without the safety of shadows or strangers. I hesitated in front of the mirror, brushing my hair slowly, every movement deliberate. I studied the reflection, trying to separate who I thought I was from who I was becoming. The girl staring back was vulnerable, uncertain, yet undeniably alive. I could see her in my eyes, in the slight curve of my shoulders, in the way my hips shifted as I moved. I felt a swell of conflicting emotions, shame, fear, pride, curiosity, all crashing together. My wife entered quietly, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Ready?" she asked softly. I swallowed hard. I think so." "Good," she said. "Today, we're going to explore how you feel about you." Her words hung in the air, ambiguous yet weighty. I nodded, unsure if I fully understood, but trusting her guidance. I dressed slowly, carefully, letting each garment settle on my body. The corset pressed firmly against my torso, reminding me to hold myself upright. The skirt flowed over my legs, light and unfamiliar, but not unpleasant. The heels elevated me, not just physically but emotionally, forcing a posture that mirrored the courage I didn't yet feel inside. Once dressed, I stood before the mirror again, examining the reflection in detail. Every line, every curve, every trembling movement told a story, my story. I realized I had spent so many years hiding, shrinking, pretending, that even a fraction of self-awareness felt overwhelming. "Look at her," my wife said quietly, nodding toward the mirror. "See her clearly."
Who is she?
"Who are you?" I closed my eyes, letting the reflection sink in. It was strange, almost dizzying, to see someone so familiar, yet so unknown. I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes. This wasn't sadness. It wasn't joy, not yet. It was recognition, the kind that unsettles you, shakes your foundation, and forces you to confront truths you've been avoiding. When I opened my eyes, I whispered, "I don't know if I can be her." My wife knelt beside me, her hand warm on my knee. "You already are. Every step, every choice, every reflection, that's who she is. And she is you fully, even if it's scary to admit." I bit my lip, struggling with the weight of her words. The idea that I could exist like this, visible, vulnerable, alive, was terrifying. And yet, a strange thrill rippled through me. For the first time, I felt like I could choose. Not just follow instructions, not just wear the clothes, but actively engage with this identity, this self, this person who had always existed beneath the surface. Hours passed as we moved around the house. My wife guided me through small tasks, walking deliberately, speaking softly but clearly, observing myself in reflections in doors, windows, and mirrors. Each glance at my reflection was a test and a revelation. Each step forced me to reconcile who I had been with who I was becoming. By the evening, exhaustion settled over me, but not the kind that drained me. It was the kind that followed growth, muscles sore, heart racing, mind buzzing, but spirit alert and alive. I collapsed onto the couch, notebook in hand, and wrote slowly. Today I met her. Not fully, not perfectly, but I saw her. She is fragile. She is nervous. She is me. And somehow, that's enough to start feeling real. My wife sat beside me, her presence calm and steady. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "we'll explore the world together. And you'll learn that being seen isn't the end of fear, it's the beginning of freedom." I nodded, closing the notebook. The reflection in the mirror caught my eye one last time that night. The girl staring back trembled, uncertain, but her eyes held something new, recognition. a spark that said I exist. I am here. I am real. And for the first time, that was enough. The morning air felt different that day, sharper, heavier, alive with expectation. I dressed slowly, meticulously, each piece of clothing a new layer of both vulnerability and courage. The corset tightened against my torso, a familiar reminder to stand tall. The blouse, soft and delicate, settled over my shoulders. The skirt swayed around my legs as I moved, making each step a small act of courage. The stockings hugged my legs, and the heels, impossibly tall and delicate, forced me to balance, to be deliberate. My reflection caught my attention again. The girl staring back was trembling, but alert. Nervous, yes, but aware, and that awareness carried an unfamiliar power. She was me, yes, but she was something more, something brave in a fragile way. "Ready?" my wife asked quietly, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. I nodded, trying to steady my racing heart. "I think so." The first few steps outside were the hardest. The neighborhood was quiet, but every sound, a car door slamming, children laughing, a dog barking, echoed in my chest. I could feel every gaze, imagined or real, magnifying the smallest tremble in my hands, the slightest wobble in my heels. "Breathe," my wife murmured.
Step by step.
"Notice yourself."
So I did.
Step by step, heel by careful heel, I moved forward. The weight of the corset and the unfamiliar sway of my skirt forced me into deliberate movements. Each stride felt like a small triumph, a negotiation between fear and presence. I caught glimpses of myself in shop windows and passing mirrors. With every reflection, I flinched, then held my gaze. A group of teenagers passed us, laughing loudly. I expected mockery, whispers, judgment. But instead, one of them gave a polite nod. My lips twitched into a tentative smile, and to my surprise, it felt right. I returned it, careful, tentative, yet sincere. The smile hung between us like a fragile truce, and for a moment, the fear faded. By the time we reached the small downtown cafe my wife had chosen, my steps were steadier. I navigated the entrance carefully, heels clicking against the tiles, and felt the eyes of strangers brush past me. My chest tightened, not from the corset, but from the awareness of being fully visible. And yet, the awareness didn't crush me.
It grounded me.
We took a seat near the window, where I could observe the world outside while being observed in turn. Every glance, every whisper of conversation, every reflection in the glass became a test, a negotiation with myself. Could I exist here without hiding? Could I occupy this space without shame? The first real challenge came when a child in the cafe pointed and smiled. My heart leapt. The instinct to look away surged, but I met the child's eyes, returning the smile. The acknowledgement, simple and unjudged, filled me with an unfamiliar warmth. I was seen. I existed. I mattered, in a small, fragile, but undeniable way. My wife's gaze caught mine, calm, approving. "Notice it," she whispered. "You're alive in this space. Every step, every glance, every breath, that's presence. Own it." The walk back home was lighter, though each step still required awareness. The heels, once threatening, had become guides. The corset, once confining, now reminded me to occupy space fully. And inside me, something shifted. I wasn't just surviving the outside world. I was engaging with it, tentatively, nervously, yes, but fully. Later that evening, I sat on my bed, notebook open, pen in hand. My body ached from the hours of standing and walking, but my spirit felt alive, alert. I wrote slowly, each word deliberate. Today I walked outside. I existed fully, seen by strangers, acknowledged without shame. I am fragile, nervous, and alive. And for the first time, I feel like I can move through the world as me, even if just a little. I closed the notebook and stared at my reflection in the mirror one last time that night. The girl in the glass was trembling, uncertain, exposed, but she was alive. She was me, and for the first time, that was enough. The following morning, a weight settled over me that I couldn't shake. It wasn't the tightness of the corset or the unfamiliar sway of the skirt. It was the anticipation of facing not just the world, but myself in ways that had never been demanded before. My reflection in the mirror seemed to study me now, not as an experiment, not as a temporary disguise, but as a presence, one that I had to reconcile with, nurture, and somehow inhabit fully. I dressed slowly, deliberately, letting each garment settle over my body. The blouse brushed my shoulders lightly, the skirt swayed around my legs, and the heels forced me into a posture that felt deliberate, almost foreign. The corset pressed against my torso, reminding me to hold myself upright, to occupy space I had long avoided. I caught my reflection mid-movement and froze for a heartbeat. The girl staring back was nervous, trembling even, but there was an undeniable spark of something alive, something that wanted to exist in this body, in this form, in the world. My wife entered quietly. "Ready for today?" she asked, her voice calm but purposeful. I nodded, unable to form words. "Today," she said, "you'll face more than just reflections and strangers. You'll face the tension between who you were and who you are becoming. It will be uncomfortable, but that discomfort is growth." Her words pressed against my chest, heavier than any corset. I wanted to run, to hide, to pretend this was just another experiment. But somehow I didn't. I took a deep breath, letting the tight fabric remind me to hold myself upright, and followed her out the door. The first challenge came almost immediately. We stopped by the local park, where families strolled, dogs ran, and voices carried easily through the open space. I could feel every pair of eyes on me, imagined or real, magnifying every nervous tremor in my hands, every slight wobble in my heels. I clenched my fingers lightly, reminding myself that I had walked outside before, survived before, and could do it again. Step by step, my wife said softly. "Notice yourself. Let the world see you, and let yourself see you." I did. Step by careful step, I moved along the path, the heels guiding each movement, the corset holding me upright. Reflections shimmered in the glass windows of the nearby cafe, in the pond water, in passing car mirrors. Each glance at myself was both terrifying and electrifying. I was being watched, and I was watching me in return. A small child ran past, pointing and laughing. My first instinct was to flinch, to retreat, to hide in the comfort of shadows. But the girl in the mirror, the one shaped by corset, skirt, and the fragile courage of choice, lifted her chin. I smiled, tentatively, and returned the acknowledgement. The child smiled back and ran on. That tiny moment, so simple, struck something deep inside me. Visibility didn't have to be judgment, and acknowledgement didn't have to be shame. We continued walking, and the internal struggle intensified. Memories of my old self clashed with the presence I was cultivating. I caught myself thinking, I used to hide. I used to shrink. I would have laughed this off, avoided it entirely. But now, my chest pressed by the corset, legs swaying in the skirt, hands steadying against the bag, I realized I was learning to exist differently. I wasn't just participating in a transformation, I was being transformed. By the time we returned home, exhaustion pressed down on me physically, but mentally, a new awareness had settled. I had faced the world and survived, yes, but more importantly, I had faced myself and claimed a small portion of courage I hadn't known I possessed. That evening, notebook in hand, I wrote slowly, letting the words flow unedited. I faced the park, the reflections, the glances, and I didn't hide. I trembled, I hesitated, but I existed fully in this body, this form, this presence. Fear still exists, but so does a spark of recognition that I am me, even if different, even if fragile. I closed the notebook and studied my reflection one last time that night. The girl staring back trembled, uncertain, fragile, yet alive. Every inch of me had been tested, every nerve awakened. And for the first time, I felt a small, stubborn pride. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more reflections, more tensions between who I had been and who I was becoming. But tonight, I allowed myself to rest in the fragile triumph of having claimed even a sliver of my presence. The next day dawned bright and sharp, sunlight spilling into my room like a spotlight I couldn't hide from. My outfit was laid out neatly, familiar yet intimidating. A soft lace blouse, a flowing skirt, stockings that clung like second skin, and the heels that had become both challenge and teacher. I traced the edges of each garment with my fingers, feeling the texture, the weight, the subtle promise of transformation. I caught my reflection in the mirror and froze. The girl looking back was no longer just trembling. She was deliberate, cautious, alive. Her eyes met mine with a flicker of recognition. She is me. I am her. The thought both thrilled and terrified me. "Ready?" my wife asked softly, her hand brushing against my shoulder. I nodded, swallowing the lump of nerves lodged in my throat. Today, we weren't just walking the familiar streets. Today, we were going to a small community gathering, a social event with strangers, families, people who had no reason to coddle me or guide me. This would be my first real test in a social setting outside our familiar neighborhood. The walk there was long, deliberate. Each step on the pavement felt magnified, every glance from strangers feeling like scrutiny. I noticed the subtle sway of my skirt, the firmness of my heels pressing me into upright posture, and the way my chest rose and fell beneath the corset. My heartbeat raced, but I forced myself to breathe slowly. Step by careful step, I moved, letting each stride anchor me in presence. As we approached the gathering, laughter and chatter spilled into the air, mingling with the scent of food and freshly cut grass. My stomach knotted. I wanted to hide, to melt into the background, to disappear. But the corset reminded me to stand tall. My heels reminded me to move deliberately. And the girl in the mirror reminded me to exist. My wife took my hand, steadying me as we entered. Eyes turned, some curious, some indifferent, some faintly amused. I felt a familiar flush of anxiety, the old instinct to shrink, to disappear. But I didn't. I followed her through the crowd, letting my awareness of posture, presence, and identity guide me. A small child approached, tugging at her mother's hand. The child's eyes widened as she studied me, curiosity plain on her face. I froze for a heartbeat, uncertainty clawing at my chest. Then slowly I smiled. Tentative, small, sincere. The child grinned and waved. I waved back. That tiny connection sent a thrill through me, fragile but undeniable. I exist. I am seen. I matter. Conversations swirled around me, strangers exchanging casual words while I moved among them, listening, observing, and occasionally contributing softly. My voice trembled at first, hesitant, uncertain, but gradually it grew steadier. Each word, each glance, each smile reinforced the strange, delicate truth. I could navigate the world as her, as me, and survive. Later, sitting on a bench, I let my gaze drift to the reflections in the glass of a nearby building. My own figure was mirrored dozens of times, each reflection slightly distorted, but undeniably present. I realized that every choice I had made, every hesitant step in heels, every tremble under the corset, every moment of doubt, had led to this, a fragile, tentative claim of self. By the time we returned home, exhaustion pressed against me, but not defeat. My hands ached from clutching my bag, my legs ached from the unfamiliar stride in heels, but my heart felt strangely buoyant. I had faced the world. I had faced strangers. I had faced myself. And I had survived, even thrived in a quiet, delicate way. That night, notebook open, pen in hand, I wrote. Today I walked among strangers. I was seen, I was acknowledged, I trembled, I faltered, but I existed. I am fragile, nervous, unsteady, but alive. I am becoming someone I can recognize, someone I can accept, someone I can trust to step into the world. I closed the notebook, gazing at the reflection in my bedroom mirror. The girl staring back was trembling, yes, but she was awake. She was present. She was me, real, deliberate, and undeniably alive. The following morning was heavy with silence. I woke before dawn, the world outside still gray and unmoving. My reflection in the mirror looked calm, but inside I felt a low hum of restlessness. I had survived the public world once, but now came something even harder, facing someone from my past. My wife had suggested it. "You can't keep hiding from everyone who used to know you," she said gently over breakfast. "You'll never be free if you're still afraid of their opinions." She was right. Part of me had been growing stronger, but part of me still hid behind shadows of who I used to be, the man everyone once recognized. That version of me still existed in memories, in old photos, in names spoken casually by others. That day, I decided to visit my younger brother. We hadn't seen each other in months. He didn't know about all this. I rehearsed what I'd say, how I'd explain. But there's no simple way to explain something that's still evolving even inside yourself. The walk to his apartment felt endless. Every step echoed like a heartbeat, quick and uneven. My outfit was modest, a soft pink sweater, jeans that fit my new curves, and sneakers. I wanted to look casual, but my nerves betrayed me. My hands kept brushing over my hair, checking, smoothing, adjusting. When he opened the door, time froze. His eyes widened, flickering over me. Confusion, recognition, disbelief. He said my name, the old one, softly, like a question that no longer had an answer. "Hey," I said, my voice barely steady. There was silence. Then he stepped back, letting me in without a word. The living room was the same, cluttered, familiar, full of echoes. I sat down carefully, hands trembling in my lap. He finally spoke, voice low and uncertain. "So, this is real?" I nodded.
Yeah.
"It's real. It's me." He stared for a long moment, trying to piece together the person he used to know with the one sitting before him. I felt exposed, raw, every breath shallow. "I didn't plan it," I whispered. "It wasn't some decision made overnight. It's been building for years. I just didn't have the words for it. Or the courage." He didn't interrupt. He just listened, and that alone was something. I told him about the first time I saw myself in the mirror and didn't look away. About the trembling fear, the awkward beginnings, the feeling of losing control, yet finding peace in the same moment. I told him about my wife, how she hadn't abandoned me, how she had seen something in me I hadn't yet dared to face. There was a long pause when I finished. Then, quietly, he said, "You sound happier." That one sentence made my eyes sting. My throat tightened. "I think I am," I said, my voice cracking. For the first time in a long while, I feel like I'm not pretending. He looked at me again, and something shifted in his expression. Not full understanding, but something close to acceptance. "It's weird," he admitted, "but I guess I can see it. You look more like yourself than before." I didn't know that was possible. We sat in silence after that. It wasn't a silence of rejection, but the quiet space where something new begins to grow. When I finally left his apartment, the world outside felt warmer, lighter somehow. I had faced a part of my past and survived it. My steps home were slow, but my heart was steady. That night, I found my wife in the kitchen, her hair tied loosely, her smile soft and knowing. I told her everything, every word, every pause, every flicker of understanding. She listened, nodding, her eyes glimmering with pride. Then she said something that stayed with me long after. "You didn't just tell him your truth. You told it to yourself again. And that's what real change is, when you stop running from who you already are." Later, as I lay in bed, her words echoed in my mind. I realized transformation isn't a single moment. It's 1,000 small choices, stitched together by courage and love. I was still learning how to live as myself, still trembling, still uncertain. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of my reflection anymore. The girl in the mirror wasn't just an image now. She was becoming my story. It's strange how you can live your whole life blending into the background until the day you choose not to. That morning, I woke with a strange calm in my chest, the kind that only comes before a storm. My wife was still asleep beside me, the faint rise and fall of her breathing steady, grounding. For the first time, I wasn't just thinking about my reflection or my family. I was thinking about the world outside, the one that didn't yet know me like this. The sun had barely risen, spilling gold light over the window curtains. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the outfit I'd laid out the night before, a simple white blouse, high-waisted trousers, and a blazer that hugged my frame just enough to remind me who I had become. Nothing extravagant, nothing loud, but for me, it might as well have been armor. Because today wasn't just another step, it was my first day back at work. A few weeks earlier, I'd taken time off. They thought it was for personal reasons, which wasn't entirely false. But explaining transformation, real, human, emotional transformation, doesn't fit neatly in a leave form. My wife had encouraged me. "You can't hide forever," she said softly as she fixed my collar that morning. "They need to see the person you are now, not the one they remember." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe I was strong enough. Driving to the office, my hands trembled slightly on the wheel. The city felt different, sharper, as if every glance passing through my window could see something I was still learning to accept. I parked outside and sat there for a long minute, staring at the building's mirrored windows. My reflection stared back, delicate makeup, smooth hair framing my face, lips faintly pink. I whispered to my reflection, "You've already survived worse. Breathe." When I stepped inside, the familiar hum of the office greeted me. Keyboards, quiet chatter, the faint scent of coffee and toner. Heads turned, eyes flickered up from screens, darted toward me, then quickly away again. It was subtle, but I felt it, 1,000 silent questions hanging in the air. I smiled anyway. I had to. "Morning," I said softly, my voice even, careful, practiced. Some people smiled back immediately, polite, maybe supportive. Others hesitated. One coworker blinked twice, as if his brain was trying to reconcile two memories that didn't match. My manager came forward, eyes kind but cautious, like someone stepping onto thin ice. "It's good to see you back," he said after a pause. "Good to be back," I replied, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it echoed in my ears. The day unfolded in slow motion. Every email, every task, every hallway glance felt heavier than usual. But the weight wasn't just fear anymore. It was awareness. Awareness of who I had become and how visible that now was. At lunch, a few coworkers joined me out of habit, maybe curiosity, maybe kindness. The small talk started awkwardly, but as I spoke, something strange happened. The tension eased. My laughter sounded more natural than I expected. One of them, Anna, the quiet one from accounting, finally said, "You look really happy, you know. Different, but in a good way." Her words hit me harder than she could have known. "Thanks," I managed to say, but inside, my chest felt warm. Happiness wasn't something I'd always recognized in myself, but maybe it had been waiting for me all along, hidden beneath the layers I'd spent years pretending to wear comfortably. Later that afternoon, I went to the restroom and stood before the mirror again. The same mirror where I used to check my tie, fix my hair, adjust a collar. Now I looked at my reflection, soft curls framing my face, a gentle sweep of mascara, lips that trembled slightly when I smiled, and realized that even my posture had changed. I wasn't shrinking from my own gaze anymore. I was standing taller. I remembered all the nights I'd stayed awake wondering what it would be like to live like this, not in secret, not in costume, but honestly. It wasn't easy, but it was real. The difference between the two was everything. When I returned home that evening, my wife was waiting by the window. Her eyes lit up when she saw me, that proud, quiet kind of joy that doesn't need words. I sank into her arms, finally letting the day's tension spill out in shaky breaths. "How was it?" she asked softly. "Hard," I said, "but freeing." She smiled, resting her forehead against mine. "You did it. You showed them who you are." "I guess I did," I whispered, almost disbelieving. We stood like that for a while, the fading sunlight wrapping around us. The silence wasn't empty, it was full, whole, alive. I realized then that transformation wasn't just a change of appearance or name. It was this, standing in truth even when it trembled. Choosing honesty over comfort. Learning that the world might not always understand, but that doesn't mean you're wrong for being yourself. That night, I wrote in my journal before bed, something I hadn't done in years. My handwriting looked different now, almost lighter, like the person writing it had finally unclenched after years of holding her breath. I wrote, "Today they saw me. Not the mask, not the shell, not the shadow me. And even if tomorrow is hard again, at least now I know what freedom feels like." When I closed the notebook, I caught my reflection once more, tired eyes, faint smile, soft hair falling against my cheek. The woman staring back wasn't a fantasy or a phase. She was the result of every tear, every fear, every small act of defiance that had built this quiet courage. And as I turned off the light, I realized that maybe this was the real beginning, not the end of my old life, but the first honest chapter of the one I was meant to live. Some nights, silence says more than words ever could. It had been a week since I'd returned to work, and life was starting to fall into something that resembled routine again. But it wasn't the same kind of routine we'd had before, not the quiet predictability of two people sharing a home. This felt new, fragile, like a house built from glass. Every moment shimmered with beauty, but also the threat of shattering if either of us stepped too hard. That evening, my wife sat on the couch, legs tucked under her, scrolling absently through her phone. The TV played softly in the background, something we weren't really watching. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, holding 2 mugs of tea, wondering if I should say anything or just sit beside her and let the silence fill the space between us. She looked up before I could decide. "You've been quiet lately," she said, her voice gentle but searching. "I've been trying not to be too much," I replied with a nervous smile, handing her a cup. "Too much," she echoed, her brow furrowing. I hesitated. "I don't want you to feel like you're losing me. I know things are changing. I can see it in the way you look at me sometimes." She exhaled softly, setting the mug down. "It's not about losing you," she said. "It's about learning you all over again." Her words hit me with a strange mixture of relief and ache. Learning me, that was exactly what it felt like. For both of us. I sat beside her, folding my legs beneath me. The faint scent of her perfume lingered in the air, familiar, comforting. I'd always loved that about her. How, even in silence, she had a presence that filled the room. She turned to face me fully now, her eyes softer than they'd been all week. "You're different," she said, "but not in the way I expected. You're calmer, happier, even when you're unsure. It's like watching you breathe for the first time." I swallowed hard. "And how does that make you feel?" She thought for a moment, gaze distant. "Proud," she said finally, "and scared. Because the person I love is still here, but now I'm realizing I never really knew how much you were holding back from me." Her honesty stung in a way that felt necessary, like a wound that needed air before it could heal. "I didn't mean to hide," I said quietly. "I was just afraid. Afraid you'd stop seeing me as your partner." "I never stopped seeing you," she replied, her voice breaking slightly. "But I'd be lying if I said I didn't need time to adjust. It's hard to untangle years of what we used to be." We sat there, two people who loved each other but were still learning how to fit into the same space again. Then, she reached for my hand, slow, deliberate. Her fingers intertwined with mine, and for the first time that night, I let myself exhale. "You know," she said softly, "when I married you, I thought I was getting one kind of story. And now it feels like I'm living another one entirely." I looked at her, heart trembling. "Do you regret it?" Her eyes lifted to mine, steady, luminous. "No," she whispered. "If anything, I think I just needed to understand that love can evolve, just like people do." That moment stretched, suspended, fragile and glowing like a held breath. Later that night, she asked if I'd help her with something in the bedroom. I followed her, curious. On the bed was a dress, soft ivory, simple, but elegant in its cut. I bought it a while ago, she said, brushing her hand along the fabric. I wasn't sure when to show you. I froze. For me? She nodded. Try it on. Just let me see you. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted the dress. The fabric felt impossibly light, like something that belonged to a dream. I slipped it over my head, the satin gliding across my skin, falling perfectly into place. When I turned around, she was watching me, not with judgment, not even surprise, but awe. You're beautiful, she said, her voice barely a whisper.
I didn't know what to say.
I felt tears gather in my eyes before I could stop them. I've never felt beautiful before, I admitted. Not really. She stepped closer, tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear.
You always were, she said.
You just didn't believe it yet. We stood there, inches apart, the air heavy with something wordless but sacred. In that quiet moment, I realized love wasn't static. It wasn't about who we used to be or who we thought we'd stay as. It was about choosing each other again, in every version, every form, every fragile chapter of becoming. When she finally whispered, "Come here," and pulled me into her arms, I felt something inside me settle. Not as a husband, not as someone pretending to fit a mold, but as a person finally seen, finally loved without the armor. That night, as I lay beside her, the world felt softer, as if it had finally accepted the truth we'd both been learning to speak. That love isn't about who changes, but how you grow together when one of you does. The day of the ceremony came faster than I'd expected. It wasn't a real wedding, not in the traditional sense, but it felt like one. A quiet promise made not just to my wife, but to myself. She'd suggested the idea weeks ago, sitting across from me at breakfast, her eyes glimmering with something tender. "You've been reborn," she'd said. "You deserve to celebrate that. Not just as a change, but as a vow, to love who you are." And somehow, I'd said yes. That morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains like a blessing. My heart raced as I looked in the mirror. The reflection staring back didn't look like the person who'd once hidden behind oversized shirts and awkward smiles. This reflection was soft, present,
real.
My hair framed my face perfectly, the light catching in the subtle curls my wife had helped me shape. My skin glowed faintly with a kind of peace I hadn't known for years. And the dress, oh, the dress. Ivory silk, gentle and flowing, not loud or showy, but simple and pure. It hugged me in all the right places, reminding me with every breath that I had finally stopped fighting the body I lived in. I stood there, trembling slightly, when she appeared behind me. She was dressed elegantly in a dark navy gown, her smile both proud and teary. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. I nodded, though my voice caught. "I think so." She stepped closer, placing her hands on my shoulders. "Then take a deep breath. You're not losing anything today. You're gaining the rest of your life." Her words sank deep into me, steadying my heartbeat. The small garden outside was filled with a quiet hum of afternoon, leaves swaying, sunlight filtering through branches, a soft wind carrying the scent of lilac. Only a few people were there, my brother, a couple of close friends, and her sister. Nothing grand, just enough to make it real. As I walked down the narrow path of rose petals she had laid out, I felt the strangest combination of fear and peace. Every step seemed to erase a shadow I'd carried for years. Every heartbeat felt like a whisper of freedom. When I reached her, she took my hand, firm, sure, unshaking. Her eyes met mine with a kind of love I hadn't dared dream of before this journey began. She began to speak, her voice calm and steady. "You once stood before me as someone unsure of who they were," she said. "But today I see someone whole. Someone brave enough to start again, not because the world told them to, but because their soul demanded to be seen." Her words broke me open. I felt tears fall before I could stop them. Then she handed me a small silver band, not a wedding ring, not a symbol of marriage, but of rebirth. "Put it on," she whispered, "and say it." My fingers shook as I slid the ring onto my hand. "I promise," I said, my voice trembling but clear. to stop hiding, to live as the woman I am, to love this truth, and to never let fear decide who I get to be again. The quiet that followed felt sacred. Everyone clapped softly, but I barely heard them. My world had narrowed to her eyes, to her smile, to the way her thumb brushed away the tear running down my cheek. She leaned closer and whispered, "You've always been my bride. I was just waiting for you to see it too." The wind stirred around us, lifting a few petals into the air. It felt like the world itself was exhaling, like something old had finally been released. That night, when the guests were gone and the candles burned low, I stood once more before the mirror. I looked at myself, the soft dress, the tired smile, the traces of mascara near my eyes, and felt a warmth I couldn't name. I whispered, almost to the reflection itself, "I forgive you for all the years you were afraid." And for the first time, I didn't just look like her. I was her. I wasn't the husband who once lived in shadows. I wasn't the person torn between duty and desire. I was someone new, someone born from the ashes of fear, shaped by love, and carried forward by the quiet, enduring promise of becoming whole. And as I turned off the light, I smiled softly to myself. Because after everything, I had finally become my own bride.